Our next speakers are Janet Howieson and Francesca Goodman-Smith. Now, we met Francesca from the Fight Food Waste CRC earlier in the day. Her co-presenter this afternoon is Janet Howieson, an Associate Professor with the Food Science and Technology Group at Curtin University. Janet has worked on multiple post-harvest projects with the seafood industry. Her projects include supply chain optimisation, new product development, processing innovation, quality and shelf life, sustainable packaging and geographical provenance. Transformation of seafood and horticultural waste has also been a research priority for Janet, along with other sectors interested in value-adding waste. Now, Francesca's going to kick off their presentation, which is called Food and Beverage Waste Transformation, What's Happening within WA and How to Become Involved. And then partway through, she'll invite up Janet. Over to you, Francesca.
Thank you, Josh. You guys will be sick of seeing me, so I'll try and keep it short and sweet. As Josh mentioned, Janet and I are very excited to share some information about a new project that we're embarking on with DPIRD. It's the latest project in the CRC, and we are looking at engaging with WA food and beverage businesses to guide and harness their knowledge around food transformation and look for the most valuable opportunities for industry to get involved in. So today we will go a little bit over the state of play in WA at the moment, and for food waste more broadly, just a little refresh. Then we'll talk through some examples of what has and hasn't worked and some lessons learnt. And then we'll talk about the new project, the framework, and how to get involved with that. So we've seen this slide earlier, but I wanted to refresh everybody on the fact that we have really, really good food waste data in Australia. We're very lucky that FIAL has mapped a baseline of food waste across the entire food supply chain, and that gives us a really good idea of where, sorry, it's gone on too far back, there we go, gives us a really good idea of where the biggest opportunities exist. So in terms of tonnes of food waste, we can see the split across the food supply chain. As part of the new project, we want to get an idea of the food waste profile for WA. So we do want to undertake a benchmarking exercise that can tell us about whether the profile is similar here in WA or whether there's different hotspots or opportunities that businesses should be looking at valorising or harnessing the potential of. So we looked at the tonnage of food waste. Now we can also look at the value of food waste across that supply chain. So this is some older data, but it shows the losses that happen across each part of that food supply chain and the financial value that is lost at every stage of that supply chain as well. So that helps to give us information on where we should be focusing as well and where the biggest opportunities lie. So when it comes to transforming food and beverage waste, there are so many different ways that we could look at that opportunity. There are so many end destinations that are possibilities, and how can we possibly decipher where to act and where to begin targeting for these interventions? What makes the most financial sense? What makes the most sense in terms of collaboration and partnerships? So Australia has signed up to the halving food waste target, which is one of the Sustainable Development Goal targets. And this is a really good starting point, a really good framing to help us make that first cut of the decision-making process. So if we want to achieve this target in Australia of halving food waste by 2030, we need to take part in initiatives that count towards that target. So those are modelled based on the food waste hierarchy, which Josh introduced us to earlier. And that's looking at first avoiding food waste in the first place or preventing it. Then it's looking at redistributing that food waste. And then it's looking at adding value to that food waste. So that is part of the framework and it's part of the decision-making process to make sure we're maximising the value of that food. So this is another way to look at that, looking at the prevention and redistribution as part of that circular cycle And then when we look at valorization, really making sure that we're looking at keeping food in the food system as much as possible, so making new food products out of it, looking at it as inputs to agriculture, and then also looking at generating new materials. So it becomes quite difficult making those trade-offs around what you explore and where you go with each of these new opportunities. So this project is to help businesses through that process. So I just wanted to run through a couple of examples from existing Fight Food Waste CRC projects, which have led us to understanding that we need a common, consistent framework to then evaluate these opportunities. So the first one I want to talk through is a collaboration between AG Schilling and SARDI, which is the South Australia R&D Institute. Now, this was a project that came about because the producer, the grower, had a need to valorise their waste stream. They had a waste stream that was costing them money. They wanted to explore what opportunities existed for creating new products out of that waste. So there was an interest from that grower to do something better. However, they then need to engage with other parts of the supply chain in order to evaluate what the best options are, where the market exists, and where they want to take those end products. So it's really exciting to have growers engaged, and we want to help them create the most successful products that they can out of that surplus. Another example of a project that we've worked on was with Sunripe. So they are a snack tomato company. And they took part in a co-design process. So at the very start of the project, they actually brought consumers in, so end users, consumers, to say, we want these sort of products out of snack tomatoes. So that's another interesting lens, another element. So we've heard, we've got growers who are identifying a challenge. We've also had examples where we have consumers saying, this is what we want, this is what we're demanding, so that's the market piece. Then when it comes through to this, so we worked with growers in South Australia to look at potato supply chain valorisation as well. This is where it became really, really important to understand the economics, because if it didn't stack up economically, they would not want to make the decision to invest in infrastructure to process their waste their waste potatoes, because it wouldn't be viable. So that's where the economics comes in, and it's another layer. So producers identifying a problem, consumers and market saying that they recognise an opportunity, and then needing to understand the cost of implementing a solution. Another example is a project that we ran with Swiss and Veridi, a technology provider, and this is where we had the commercial end user involved. So they said, we need a product that meets these certain specifications, and that helped guide the process. So we understood what the end user needed to actually be able to use that product within their supply chain and replace their existing materials. So that's another element to the process. Now, when we look at the use of black soldier flies, so black soldier flies can eat food waste, then the larvae are harvested and they're used as an input for agriculture. However, there's massive regulatory challenges that are involved in using food waste as a feedstock back into the agriculture sector. So this project was looking at the regulatory barriers. Another element that is really important when we look at evaluating the whole opportunity for making decisions about whether you transform your food waste or not, and what opportunities you look for. And then lastly, looking at the pig feed scenario. So that's using food waste in its raw form to then transform directly into animal feed. We did a modelling scenario looking at different regions and where this was economically viable. So that brings the regional context into the conversation as well, and helps us to identify that it may make sense in some areas to take part in a solution, but it may not make sense in other areas. So I've highlighted all of these projects to emphasise that there's so many different pieces to the puzzle that it is really hard for businesses to navigate where they should play. But taking learnings from existing projects and the kinds of questions that have been asked in those projects, we can build a framework to help businesses navigate this space better. So we need to engage with producers who know they have a waste problem. They know they have, they want to maximise that opportunity. We need to understand the market demand. So we need to understand what the end users want. We need to understand the costs of infrastructure to implement solutions and what sort of scale you need. We also need to understand what end users' specifications are in order for those supply chains to actually be scalable. We need to understand the regulatory environment and whether what we're taking part in is actually a solution that's only allowed in certain states and not other states, or is it going to create problems when we want to export? And then we also need to understand whether those solutions are localised and make sense in some areas and not others. So all of those pieces of the puzzle can fit into a framework to help businesses navigate that space. So I would like to hand over to Janet to run you through some more detail on research that has been undertaken, lessons learnt, and then how that's informing this new project and how you can be involved with it.
Hi everyone, just getting myself back up again after the workshop. So look, I do apologise if I repeat some of the things I said in the workshop today, but hopefully not too much repetition. And as Josh said, I work in the Food Science and Technology group at Curtin University. So we're very parochial here. So we've talked a lot about waste transformation nationally, but I really want to talk about WA. So there's this picture at the top. Doriana's left now, but I use it all the time. That is imported banana pulp from India, which Doriana was saying earlier is, massive amount of the product that comes into Australia. So in a WA context, contemporary policy, so there's been quite a lot of talk already today about circular economies and sustainability targets and goals, both internationally with the SDGs, but also nationally. So it's a very topical subject at the moment. There's quite a lot of state and federal funding support available for waste transformation, actually manufacturing generally, food manufacturing. This whole concept of total utilisation of the product, I've done a lot of work in seafood, and the fact of the matter is, as I'll say later, often with seafood we're throwing away 2/3 of it. So, is there something we can do with that 2/3 that, hopefully could also increase profitability? There's definitely a move towards Australian-based food processing. I think it's a bit of a COVID outcome. There's a lot of support for it. It enhances our clean, green reputation. So also a good time to be thinking, evaluating and doing things a bit differently. There's been quite a lot of discussion today about market and end use and customer drivers. They're asking more questions about the manufacturing process, sustainability credentials, also been discussed earlier. And this concept of social licence to operate, which is actually really important for seafood, so giving the consumer confidence that we're doing the right thing. And I think using the whole harvest, using everything that you harvest can be an important part of that. So I, as I said, have worked mainly with seafood, and what is, we had a discussion in the workshop, we're not going to call it waste anymore, we're going to call it byproducts, but thanks Tim for that. But yeah, just thinking about in a seafood supply chain, and this can be applied to other sectors, where are your byproducts? So it could be in production, in the production loss. So in an aquaculture context, we'd be talking about disease or pests, and I think similarly in horticulture and other sectors. this idea of non-retained or non-utilised products. So in seafood, there's a lot of fish that aren't caught because simply not economically viable to catch them. And that is often around consumer perception of the product, but the fact is you can't sell them for more than what that'll cost you to harvest them. And I think we've seen a similar, there's always quite a lot of press and media around horticultural products that are just left in the paddock. So that's another area for us. There's supply chain management optimisation. So look, Meredith, fantastic talk this morning about shelf life extension and what packaging means. We also do quite a lot of work with monitoring temperature through chains and working out where, for seafood or for perishable products, where you've got hot spots of temperature, which will in fact, will impact the quality and therefore the shelf life of your product. So, do you want to put your focus in that area, or do you want to just make some new products from the processing waste? So thinking about where you want to put your focus on your waste journey is really important, because the project that we're talking about is, it's going to be flexible to allow you to do that. So we expect shelf life optimisation packaging might be just as important as trying to make a new product from processing waste. That's my favourite graph at the bottom there for seafood. So you can see the yellow. Normally when you process seafood, the blue is what's eaten and the yellow is what's discarded. So even with a prawn, a rock lobster, you're looking at about a third of the product that's actually eaten, 2/3 is discarded. Filleting, depends on the species that you're dealing with, but, somewhere between 35 to 50% is discarded. I will say we're not touching the consumer side of things. We're definitely working, up to the retail point of the supply chain. So I've been working with seafood waste for really about 15 years now, and lots of ideas. So we can strip the mince off the fish frames, and you can see that fish mince there, that comes off a fish frame after it's been filleted, and we can get around 20% more product that way, and then that fish frame can be used to do make fish burgers or something like that. Or we can put it through a high moisture extruder and make a product like that one on the left. So, like a moist sort of stick, fish stick. Francesca mentioned it. We've done quite a few trials looking at feeding fish waste to black soldier fly larvae, which is pretty cool. Crushing up abalone viscera to produce the powder. We can add enzymes to the one on the right there. That's adding enzymes to Patagonian toothfish waste, and it hydrolyses it, and then you can have an oil layer and a high protein layer. The one at the bottom there is seconds mussels turned into a stock, and dried swim bladders worth a fortune in Asia. But the problem was we had all these ideas which were pretty cool, we thought. We had the crab, you can see crab cakes we took to commercial implementation, and the gorgeous caviar there. But mostly we were having trouble getting to implementation. And that really started us to think about, what can we do to improve the chances for commercial implementation, which also led us to understand that the technical side of things is usually possible. With some good scientists at small scale in the lab, you can generally produce a product from waste. The problem is getting it to a point where it will be implemented commercially. And to be honest, that is often a business thing. So around cost, around logistics, around scale, around perishability. So we've sort of tried to change our approach, and that's not always easy, but to make sure that we're looking at a multidisciplinary approach to these types of opportunities. Specifically, use experts. Very important to use experts to understand where your own skill set lies, and to call in experts. In my case, that's business experts or cost-benefit experts or logistics experts that can, ensure a really good outcome. and be systematic, I guess. So this was sort of, given all those thinkings, this is when we first started thinking about developing a systematic approach of stepping through a waste transformation opportunity or a shelf life extension opportunity. And our approach was, first of all, and it's been discussed a lot today, find out everything you can about what's been done before, whether that is commercially or academically. Do that background work first. And has been raised today, this we should be thinking about the regulatory legislative side of things really early on, not down the track when it's going to become a barrier. And then talk to people. So talk to your markets, talk to all the other people in your supply chain. There's been a lot of discussion about consultation today. Talk to other people in your sector. You know, is collaboration an opportunity? Because this gives you an idea, especially talk to your markets and you know, the sorts of products you're thinking about. Is that something that a market will buy? And if they do, how much will they pay for it? So we'd say do all this stuff up front before we actually started doing the product development trials, because that process allows us to narrow down the sorts of things that we try. I'll show you an example of this in a minute. Yeah, and then after we did product development trials, which is the food science side of things, go back to the market and say, oh, look, you know, it looks like this is the sort of product we can develop. What do you think? Really, the mapping, we've just been talking about this in the workshop, really important to map your tonnages. We talked about quality of them, also seasonality. You really need to understand your volumes and what you'll be dealing with. We also took it through to designing a facility, designing what equipment you need, costing it, and then take all that information and do a cost-benefit analysis. And then, are we going or not? Based on all that information, not just the food science, all the economic and logistical side of things as well. So we tried to do this. I shouldn't say we tried to, that makes it negative to begin with. But anyway, we went through a process like this in Carnarvon with the idea of a collaborative processing for waste, processing hub for waste. And so, yeah, we did a lot of consultation with all the stakeholders. We had a good look at the market, worked out like these are the sort of competitive processes. We found out what all those prices were, where they came from, what sort of composition. And then we sort of tried, from that we worked out our scope, which was basically just going to be not stuff that wasn't harvested. It starts from, as Doriana was saying earlier, from the packing shed and the losses from the packing shed. And that also included times when you didn't send the product to market because the cost of transport was more than the cost of actually selling it. And we did the mapping as well, so we knew exactly what we were dealing with. We did all these trials in a factory up in Carnarvon. It was just fantastic 3 days. I think we had 25 different processed products. And from that, we worked out, you know, the recoveries from the waste, you know, what percent we could turn into a product. We looked at shelf life. We looked at some quality side of things in a food safety context. And, and we looked at, you know, that the feasibility of all those different products in the context of a scale-up. And we invited the community in to have a look at all the products and taste them. It was really fun. And then we designed a facility, which was really fantastic with the equipment that had been suggested to us. And it was, as we said, a building for tomorrow, not today, so it was completely solar powered, as has been discussed today. The walls were made of material that was more insulated or things like that. And we did a cost-benefit analysis, which included the raw material prices, the prices of the markets, processing, packaging and transport costs, and included seasonality of supply because we were looking at 5 or 6 different waste streams, but the equipment was the same, so you could switch. Guess what? Didn't go ahead. Why not? It was over a 10-year payback. I'll tell you what it was about. Industry champions. We had industry engagement, but we didn't have industry champions. But it was, yeah. These are all lessons learnt. So we swapped based on that to this new framework, which was even more systematic and prescriptive of stepping through, the background is the same, but, being very clear about your objectives, your boundaries and your evaluation parameters, mapping, again, the consultation steps, prioritising activity, again, the food science side of coming in, the facility, equipment design and costings, and the cost-benefit analysis. But the industry industry engagement side of it is part of that. Number 2, setting objectives, boundaries, etc. So we've implemented that framework into 2 projects that I've currently got with the Fight Food Waste CRC. One is a project with the National Wild Harvest Prawn Industry. And it's got pillars of what were priorities for the group, which is sustainable packaging, better preservation, onboard automation, and traceability, digital traceability. And we're quite happy with how this project's going. So we've got new preservation techniques being used on board. We've got, I think, 3 vessels that have undergone a refit for their processing automation, which has been quite hard in the current climate, but they've hung in there. And we're trialling different types of packaging. And similarly, I've also got a project, similar national project with the Abalone Council. And again, we've gone through those steps in a similar way. So that mapping, not sure if Lynn's still here, but Lynn's a business student that I have. Anyway, she's done an amazing job with mapping the entire abalone supply chain, which is very complex in Australia. And we've done various product development trials. That's to the left there is like as a supplement for pet food. That's hydrolysing the waste with enzymes, as I manage. And then we've ground up the shell and we're starting. So these projects are sort of progressing quite nicely using that framework that we've developed. But we thought there was a gap, and that gap was for cash-strapped, busy food and beverage SMEs that may or may not have the resource capability to undertake a journey like this. And that's what our project is about, because we believe these businesses may or may not need some support that we potentially can provide, but also confidence to move towards, in an economic sense, to move towards a transformation activity. So our question was, could our framework be tested and modified to work for these SMEs? It's a different context from those larger projects we've been doing with the prawn and the abalone industry at a national level, where there's a strong industry organisation to help drive everything that goes on. And we thought if we can go through a process like this, and we're calling it a pre-feasibility assessment that is economic, technical and logistical, then all these funding opportunities, you can go into those opportunities with confidence, or even making a decision to undergo that transformation within your own business. That's what this project's about. And I won't go over this too much, but, as Francesca mentioned, we are going to start with a benchmarking exercise. We've got the draft decision-making framework. From the workshop today, we'll be starting to tweak it from some of the comments we got back today. We want to test it on 5 case studies, at least, and we would work through the process with those businesses. And then we'll use that to proof our tool, which will then be made available statewide, I guess, or even nationally. That's the project. Here's our steps. I won't go them through, but it's a similar, the steps that I've just outlined there, with the last stage being a pre-commercialisation recommendation. Just don't want to spend too much time on this, but it's not just me. In the food science team at Curtin, we've actually just got a new person added, but we've got specific skill sets. So we've got grain, we've got dairy, we've got meat. So, don't feel that you wouldn't be supported for a different type of sector, because we've really worked to build that capacity across different sectors. Plus, we've got our business school colleagues who are amazing, and we also have external consultants that we use. So it's a multidisciplinary approach, not just Curtin Food Science. I wanted to tell you a really quick story. This is an SME. I love these guys. So we're dealing with waste before anyone even thought about it. They take the waste from the tuna industry in South Australia and they hydrolyse it to make organic fertiliser. About 1,500 tonnes, and the alternative to landfill, would have been a massive cost. But they did have some problems with the process they were using before, which was like so using the enzymes that were already present in the tuna itself. That was what was using. Hydrolysis, when it just breaks down into a liquid form. And there were some problems with that, inconsistent product quality and a longer production time. So we worked with them to switch over to an enzyme-induced hydrolysis, which has, it wasn't without its challenges, the switch, but it has opened up some new markets for them, given them a more consistent product. And what I really wanted to talk about circular economy is that now we use that fish hydrolysate, we call it, and we've run it into aquafeed trials, so it can really kick up the performance of plant-based materials because of the fish side of it, which is really good from an aquaculture sustainability point of view. And we're just running trials with it as a organic fertiliser and also around the whole regen agriculture type of thing. So we're really looking to make that circular. And I've been waiting to do that for so long, so exciting. Yeah, so some final thoughts. Use experts, importance of mapping, fair return, it's really important to me, getting a fair return across the chain. Consider collaboration, that's been discussed quite a lot today. Consider building tomorrow and consider a modular approach. We discussed this in the workshop, don't try and do everything all at once, but just step through your priorities. So there it is. Get involved. That QR code leads to a survey, which is part of our collection of data for the benchmarking, but we'll also, hopefully we can get your contacts from that so that we can build. We're just discussing about how we're going to do the extension on the project because there'll be an expression of interest going out to be involved in the project to companies. So that's it. And if you can't pick it up, it should be on our Curtin table. There you go. Thanks, everyone.